Welcome to the ninth episode of the American Jail Association's podcast. I'm Chris Daniels, Executive Director of the American Jail Association. The focus of this episode is going to be recruitment, obviously a very hot topic in our nation's jails. I'm joined today by Major Shaun Klucznik with the Hernando County Sheriff's Office in Florida, and Major Klucznik is also AJA's president. And I'm also joined by the Whalls Group. And I'd like to ask those folks to introduce themselves, starting with Mark. And if one of you could also talk a little bit about the Whalls Group so that folks know exactly what your focus is on in this space.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Whalls, and I would like to thank the American Jail Association for letting us join today's podcast. And we really appreciate the opportunity to connect with everyone. Just to give you a little background on Whalls Group, we originally started out working across several different industries before making the transition into the corrections field. Today, our sole focus is corrections, detention, law enforcement. That is where all our expertise and attention go. Over time, we have come to understand the corrections hiring landscape extremely well, how to approach it, where the challenges lie, and what strategies are effective. That said, every new partnership teaches us something valuable. And I'd like to introduce Ashley.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ashley Wiles. I am the Director of Client Solutions here at Whalls Group. So I meet all of your lovely faces when we go to conferences and we talk about all of the problems you're having with recruitment, and really kind of guide you along the path to success. So good to be here. I really appreciate Chris and everyone else inviting us today. We're excited to teach you guys some things.
Great. And my name's Eden Broggi. I'm the Director of Solutions at Whalls Group, which essentially means that every time we talk to a new facility, we put together a customized solution to get their hiring process to work for them, to bring the best candidates to them in the fastest time possible. I think Mark said enough about the company, but if we're left to say more, I would just say that, as we have come to learn the corrections landscape, and particularly the recruiting side of it, we really have become passionate about being able to take facilities that are severely understaffed and help. And I think a lot of what we get to do that is so much fun is find things that are working in one state. It's working in Montana, and you might not have ever heard of that in California unless we all get to meet at places like AJA and discuss these things. So we thank all of you for that opportunity to connect everybody.
Yes, and Ashley and Eden, we're very grateful for the information you've presented at those conferences in the past, our Fall Summit, our AJA Annual Conference, and Jail Expo, which is coming up again here May 16th in Milwaukee. And so we always look forward to your presentations. Great information. And your Whalls Group obviously has their thumb on the pulse of what's going on in recruitment and the challenges in the jails across the nation, in addition to just having some great information about what to do about the situation. So let's start a little bit about that. What are you seeing in the agencies across the nation when it comes to the recruitments as far as some of the challenges?
You want me to take it, or you
Go
want to
ahead.
take it?
Go ahead.
We're afraid to talk over each other.
I
know. I think the biggest thing, and actually one of the things that we spoke about today, we actually just held a webinar and we were talking about generational gaps in correction. And really what we're seeing, our younger generations are much more hesitant to join the correctional space because they don't have the exposure, they don't have the experience. And I feel like corrections and detention is really an overlooked industry. When you think of law enforcement, you think of police officers, you think of sheriff's deputies, things like that, but you don't really think of what goes on after someone receives their sentence and what's that long term. So that's really what I feel like has been kind of the recent landscape, is we really have to, when we're in the recruiting field, we really have to educate these candidates on what it's like to work in a jail and how chaotic it can be. I mean, I've been to several, and just in that time, my anxiety level spikes just because everything's going crazy. People are running around everywhere. I mean, the last one I was at, there was, Eden, you remember, there was like a fire alarm going off and detainees yelling, and it's chaos. I mean, I love it, but it's not for everyone. And I think that's something that is a challenge when you're trying to recruit someone. You say, hey, I've got this great salary, great benefits, all that stuff. But the day to day is, to be honest, it can be rough. It can be really, really mentally taxing.
Yeah, it is. It's calling. And, some people like Shaun, they stick with it their entire career and they find it very rewarding. But, it takes a special kind of personality to go into a jail and want to be in a capacity to really provide the support that the incarcerated individuals need to transition to a better life on the outside. You talked a little bit about generations and the younger groups of folks coming in. I think that's one of the things that I've seen morph at the jails here just in the past few years quite a bit to help with the recruiting efforts. And Major Klucznik, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I know that the standard used to be pretty much 21 at a lot of jails, right, to come in and get a starting position, but a lot of jails have lowered that to 18. What's going on at your agency with that and some of the others across Florida?
So I can tell you 29 years ago in Florida when I started, I was 19 years old. I want to say 4 years ago, Florida actually changed the statute that allowed 18-year-olds to enter the workforce and corrections. That was a direct request, basically, of the Florida Department of Corrections because they had such a tremendous deficit when it comes to officers. So we've taken advantage of that here, and we've done a good job of recruiting at the high school level and actually selling the whole concept. I get to work at a sheriff's office, and I work for a great sheriff who's very, open thinking. And we recruit them out of high school, 18 years old, send them to the Corrections Academy, and then ask them to spend at least 2 or 3 years here with us, train them up, and then when we're satisfied that they're ready to go, we can send them to a crossover, and they can go to law enforcement side if they want to. And I'm one of those rare jail administrators that I'm not going to, stomp my feet. What do you mean you want to go to patrol? What do you mean you want to go to law enforcement? I look at it this way. We're one agency. So if there's somebody we can train up and develop into a good employee, especially if you can, you identify the track record, they're not calling out sick, they're not having use of force issues while on duty. Why not develop a good employee and then transfer on the other side, and then you kind of have a pipeline. Obviously that could cause problems in a jail setting. If all your new talent is their plan is to go to the law enforcement side, then you're going to end up having some issues later on with training officers, first line supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, eventually. Thankfully for us, everybody who comes in, about half of them want to go to patrol, and then the other half, wait, it's nice here. It's pretty good. And to Ashley's point, I think there's nobody thinks about it. I didn't know about working in a jail until I saw somebody I used to work with at a grocery store walk in a uniform. Like, what are you doing? And I didn't know it was a job. And then it turned out to be, at this point, my life's calling. So, so we do. 18 years old. We have one in the academy right now who's 18 years old. And, the process has to work. The background is a lot easier on somebody coming out of high school, a lot less jobs, a lot less moves. So it makes it easier that way. But Chris, your point is our sheriff wants to have somebody who's at least 21 driving out in patrol by themselves. So that structure that is developed in the early years as a correctional deputy or a detention deputy could translate into a more mature 21-year-old, because like Ashley said, the kids are a little different coming out of school. They pick fights online or via text message or Snapchat instead of, back in the day, not that I was doing these things, but, going to the schoolyard or the parking lot and having a regular fist fight. It's different. Challenging people is not easy to do, especially when you're young and you don't do it very often.
So Shaun, but to your point, you're the first one to ever tell us that you're recruiting in the high schools. That's the first time I've ever heard of it, right? So my background, I went from a recruiter to a national manager with Navy Recruiting Command. No one recruits better than the military, all the branches. We lived in the high schools, right? So we actually started in the sophomore year right? Showing up, showing a presence, giving a 30-minute presentation in uniform, obviously, to the junior year. And then we had our funnel of candidates from the sophomore, junior that flowed into the senior year, and it was a constant flow, right? So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and it really illustrates the point. You need to get folks thinking about it, right? Most people
Right.
coming out of high school or college aren't thinking about a career in corrections. So that's truly one of the primary challenges, is at least get them to understand it and to start thinking about it, right?
Right.
Yep. Eden, Ashley, what other challenges are you seeing?
Well, I
I
think
mean,
one, oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No,
Go
well,
ahead.
one of the things that we're seeing as a challenge, and this is in line with kind of this generation being a little bit different than the last generation, as every generation is. And this is something, Ashley, and I think it's fresh on our mind. We just came from a webinar on this topic of what does this generation want out of their employment, and what do they expect out of it? And that expectation begins the minute that they start the hiring process. So the minute that they click apply, the things that they're looking for, which are engagement, purpose, and speed, because this is a very efficient generation. If that engagement, purpose, and speed doesn't happen during the hiring process, somebody isn't personally reaching out telling them, no, it's good that you applied, we want you, and then staying with them efficiently through that process, we're likely to lose people. Whereas previously what we saw was, you should be so lucky to get this job. You'll wait for it. And when I call for an interview, you'll leave wherever you are and do it. Now candidates say, well, that's not respectful of my time. I have another job. I have to take time off to go do that. And so if they get that impression during it, the levels of what we call ghosting is throughout the hiring process is so high. And a lot of it has to do with people's mindsets towards employment, not just employment in corrections or detention, but just the way they approach employment in their life now in any way, shape, or form.
For sure. Ashley, did you have something to add to that?
Well, I mean, okay, so one of the things I like to do when we're talking to new clients is I always go on and I'll actually apply for the job myself just to see what's the response rate, how is that candidate currently treated, and it's funny because I actually did just do this 3 weeks ago. I applied to a position in Texas with a potential client, and I haven't heard anything in 3 weeks, and I'm more than qualified for the position. So I check all the boxes, and you would think, they're over 100 short. You would think they'd reach out right away, and it just doesn't happen. And I feel like there is such a huge disconnect when you have, for example, a sheriff's department, but you're working with an HR department at the county level, and there is that disconnect there. And that always kind of causes some friction, I feel like. So if you can't bring it all internally into your agency internally, that causes a lot of confusion and a lot of friction, because from what I've seen is HR teams typically they screen for minimum qualifications, but when you're doing like an e-application, online application, and for some reason, if you accidentally select, no, I don't have a driver's license versus, yes, I do have a driver's license, you're automatically DQ'd, right? So I think it's better if it can all be done internally or with one team. So that way there is clarification for stuff like that. Like, hey, did you actually mean that, you want to get all the candidates you can get. You don't want them to fall through the cracks, because it is a tough onboarding process a lot of times. So you really do want to salvage all those candidates. And it doesn't happen when there is that disconnect between HR and then, for example, a sheriff's department. So
For sure.
that's just my little 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a solid observation, and that's a reality that a lot of jails face in this country. I mean, they are government agencies. The HR process often can reside outside the jail, and it is a competitive environment. So,
Mhm.
you're talking about candidates who aren't going to wait around when they have other offers coming in for other opportunities. And so, Shaun, I know a lot of jails have really focused on trying to streamline their hiring process and their onboarding process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Ashley was spot on, and luckily at our sheriff's office, our sheriff runs everything, to include our own HR department, finance, everything. So it's all a one-stop shop. And to Eden's point, on our Facebook page sometimes, and on our website, our direct contact is our administrative sergeant, Sergeant Brad Colito. He is our recruiter. And from when people initially, inquire with him via text, cell phone, he's got an agency issued cell phone. He takes phone calls sometimes in the middle of the night. And he does a good job of not being grumpy when he answers the phone. But he's their point of contact from Jump Street all the way through the application process, where he will take the time to make sure, hey, listen, when you fill out this application, you need to be 100% honest. And if you decide to put something on the application and halfway through, as you get to the lie detector test, you decide to change an answer, odds are good you're not going to get through the process. So make sure you're honest up front. But Brad carries them through all the way through the hiring process, when they get hired, when they act as a detention, the technician, until we get them into the academy and then get them promoted to deputy. He handles them all the way through the academy, and he also manages the FTO program. So he's their contact from day one, and he's always engaged. You don't want to lose people's interest, and both points. It's very vitally important to keep the communication active, not just open, active, and it's a two-way street. I mean, I had the blessing in probably 2014 or so to fill in as the interim HR director for our agency. I learned so much. I was the jail lieutenant, and they said, hey, sheriff offered me an opportunity to fill in just for 4 months so we could find an HR director. And I was probably one of the first ones to start asking questions about, well, just because you checked that box where you accidentally said, I don't have a driver's license, what's stopping us from picking the phone up and say, did you mean to check this box? And then save that candidate. Because I learned quickly that we lost 2 viable candidates for law enforcement deputy my first week there to a county to our north, just because we were quicker to make a phone call than we were. And so that's what I worked on for 4 months, is streamlining that process. But it's important just having that, even if you made that phone call, hey, we're about to make you a job offer. So if you hear from anybody else, if you really want to be here, just give us a day. Even that contact might save it.
Right. So fast, effective communications, eliminating bottlenecks. What else would you add to the list of challenges that are kind of
I
unique
think we'd
to our
like to
jail?
hire you for Whalls Group.
You're right.
This is what we're always trying to get to everybody to do. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we see is that application to hire ratio. I think you're super fortunate, Shaun, over in Hernando County to have a team that is so efficient. But what we've seen a lot of times, and we work with a few facilities that are under federal consent decrees, and with that, most of the time, if not all of the time, it's directly related to staffing. And so we work with agencies that they have a team, but these members of the team, they're not as, I would say, efficient as you would like, because they've been working corrections for 15, 20 years. They haven't been a recruiter for 15 to 20 years. And when you look at something like the hiring process and you say, instead of, I want to make a change, you say, well, I'm comfortable with this because this is how we've been doing it for 15 to 20 years. You're going to see, that cause and effect there. And I think that kind of ties into the application to hire ratio and how important that is. So if you see that you are, processing 200 candidates per month and you're only hiring 2, that's not good numbers. That's what, 2%, 1%. You want to increase that. And I think that there's a lot of room for improvement for that with larger agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, it's not that in fixing the application to hire ratio, you're not looking to lower standards. There's usually other reasons, that candidates are falling out of the process, like people aren't picking up the phone. And I think one of the things that people forget is that they think that they're in competition with the agency down the street, and not that they're in competition with Walmart, who had them hired, promoted, and managing the floor, working days with a 401k by the time they got them to the lie detector test, and nobody called them in between. And so now by the time they call them with the job offer, they're like, hey, I'm a manager, and you're going to put me on night shift, and I think I'm happy here. So you got to get them first.
Yeah, you mentioned standards, and I that's an interesting thing, because especially with the new generation, and we talked about generational differences earlier on, I mean, I have seen some changes, or I have heard about changes around some controversial things like ink and, when was the last time you used marijuana and things like that, right? Where the standards have in fact changed somewhat. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the jails and maybe what your thoughts are about some of that?
One of the things I think we should bring up is the standards for psych and poly and how there really isn't any. And they just kind of wing it and say, oh, well, with a psychologist, you contract someone out and they pass or fail them and then put them in their personnel file and that's that. But there really isn't any benchmark for it, which I find
No national
incredibly
benchmark.
interesting in this
Yes,
industry.
for psychology specifically,
Yeah.
so many agencies have it as a wicket that you need to pass, but there isn't, and they'll say, well, we got a psychologist who's been in law enforcement. That's just them. The agency down the street has a psychologist and they have a different standard. And so we worked with one agency, 50% of people failed psych. And we worked with one agency, 100% of people passed psych. We worked with one agency that Ashley is referencing, that their standard was that the candidates needed to take a psych test online. Nobody needed to score it. It just had to be taken. So it just needed to be printed and put in their file. No one looked at it. And that was the standard check. So there isn't sort of a standard on that. If 100% of people are passing your test, this is a wicket candidates don't need to do. So some of these things are not necessarily about raising or lowering the standards, but evaluating the manner by which you're testing these standards.
Yeah.
And that has changed a lot. I think polygraph has been taken out across many states as it's become illegal in some states. But I think that doesn't speak to your point about things such as ink or actual changes to standards, not just how we measure them. I'd be curious to hear what Shaun had to say about what he's seeing on the inside.
So I'll say, well, let me start off with, I forgot to mention, we are fully staffed. We're actually overhired by 2 in the jail. Actually, we're pretty much fully staffed, the entire agency. And I'll tell you, our sheriff is very traditional when it comes to uniform, appearance. Beards are not authorized. Tattoos are authorized unless you're in certain positions. And if you're in certain positions, you got to put a long sleeve on, make sure, like, we can't have on our hands or neck or higher than our neck. As long as you can cover it and it's not offensive, you can have them. But there are quite often times we have deputies that are wearing the neoprene sleeves on one arm or something like that to cover. I mean, it is hot out in Florida, so wearing long sleeves and during the summer is brutal. But it's not a complete a no. But the sheriff's uniform standards are important, and I agree with them 1,000%. I have a tattoo on my forearm that I regret almost every day, and I wear a long sleeve when I have to. It's okay. But I just said we're fully staffed, so it's not necessarily about tattoos and beards. Sometimes it's about culture and reputation. And I think, thankfully for us, we have a strong culture and a strong reputation. So, but I've also heard that people are relaxing their standards in counties adjacent to us, allowing beards. Even sometimes seen some of these beards that are not all the way, neat and trimmed. And listen, it's up to the CEO, and if they're happy with that appearance, that's great. But I mean, our standards are just a little more traditional, let's put it that way. And I've also heard about people allowing tattoos on necks and hands and fingers, and that, I think, there's my personal opinion, I don't think that's professional. And if I could go back 20 some odd years ago and not put this tattoo on my forearm, I would. I'm not going to spend the money to take it off, because I think they say it hurts worse than the actual tattoo, so I'm not interested in that. But it's definitely wide open, and I get it. There are places that are probably going to get desperate. I've heard about some scary numbers of being short, and we were talking about processing applications. The information came out just the other day. We processed 3,600 applications as an agency last year. That's everywhere, not just the jail. And we only hired 100 people. So our standards are high, but I think our reputation is high too. So I think that's a draw.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's funny because we actually try to implement that when we bring on new clients as well. Um, we have one client who, when we did our, we call them intake meetings or implementation meetings, if you will. And essentially, what it is we roundtable and we talk about all of their benefits and what are they offering new employees and all the perks. And one of the things that was brought up was, well, when's the last time you guys had an increase in your uniform allowance? And it was in 2009 was the last time that they had an increase in their uniform allowance. I was shocked. And so when we bring up pride and uniform in that standard and you want to uphold them to that standard, you have to give them the tools for that as well. I mean, a pair of boots costs $200 for a decent pair of boots. And if you haven't, increased your uniform allowance in close to 20 years, I mean, that's not going to get them far. And you really want to, maintain that image within your agency. So I think there are definitely things, not just on the recruiting side, but when you do bring people on, you need to set them up for success. And that's a big one. I mean, image is huge. People take pride in their uniform. I'm prior military, and that was a huge thing for me. You polish your boots, you wear, you iron your uniforms, you want to look sharp. And that's how it is in law enforcement as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know that they even polish their boots in today's military.
Oh, I think they have like chloroframs now. They cheat.
Yeah, so we're kind of the conversation is trending towards retention, right? So let's talk a little bit about retention specifically, and especially someone like Major Klucznik's agency. They're fully staffed, and so then the focus does really shift to retention, right? So what would you share with the folks viewing today about your best guidance around retention?
So I can tell a little story. In fact, I actually was involved in this. We had a sheriff in South Dakota that really almost had to shut his jail down because he was so understaffed, right? So we helped get the sheriff to his needed numbers. However, they were dropping as quickly as we could give them to him, right? So our takeaway on the retention piece on that was he was so busy with other things within the sheriff's office, he wasn't able to train anybody in the jail, right? He didn't have a team to do that. He was short on supervision and just overall a training program within the jail. So he turned it around by making all of the candidates go to the state academy prior to even coming into his facility. And it made a total 180 as far as, the retention piece within his facility. And he hasn't asked us for help in a very long time, right? So it was interesting. We were recruiting people from Florida to go to South Dakota. And the other thing is they were selling hunting, fishing, and all that other good stuff too. So we call it a sizzle with a sell. You got to sell the local attractions as well too. But he did a great job by making that turn, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest point we want to make on the retention piece is nowadays candidates want to feel like they are being invested in. So if they're committing, for example, like Mark was talking about moving candidates from Florida to South Dakota, they need 3 hots and a cot. Like that's what they need to be successful before they start getting their first paycheck. And when you do something as simple as 3 hots and a cot for a few weeks before they get paid, they see that as you're investing in them, and they see that as you care about them, and that's going to make them stick around.
Yeah, we think a lot of times there's a lot of heavy bonuses that are paid out, right? And they're broken up, first 6 months, the year point, the whatever it may be. I know some are paying in the high 40s right now, 40,000s. We say that, it's like in the Navy, you call it a ditty move. It's a small move, a U-Haul, right? Some gas cards, some food cards. And some of our facilities put them up, 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And if they can go straight to the academy, right, that solves the housing issue, right? So it's very important to have some type of relocation there. Take the money that you would pay them in bonuses and put them on that front end, right? So, and we've seen that to work very well across the country, so especially in the remote areas.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And
Shelby, Montana, right, Ashley?
One of my favorite locations to recruit for. Sorry, Sean, I took a lot of Floridians from you on that one too.
And Major Klucznik, obviously the culture that you create within your agency is super important too. And I know that you're very focused on that at your jail. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'll just point out that we don't offer hiring bonuses. The state of Florida does, and I think we've taken advantage of a few of the hiring bonuses that the governor's offered for law enforcement officers, maybe leaving South Dakota, come back to Florida to get that bonus. I don't have numbers on exactly how many people we've brought back in or brought into our agency from out of state, but it's something we haven't had to depend on when it comes to bonuses. So that's good. But I think we were talking about it, and we started kind of just dovetails right off the recruitment side. Investment in people. That sometimes is as simple as sharing a cup of coffee in the morning and roll call, right? I've been a lot more busy this year as president of AJA, and I felt as if I've not been able to see my staff as often as I would like to. But quite often there are times where I'm here early enough where I'm in the lobby and I pop in a roll call, and as they're going in, I give everybody a fist bump on the way in, and then I wait for the night shift to come out, and I just an exchange, a short exchange, is a lot enough for a lot of people. Now, when I was a shift sergeant at night, did I want the major walking around the building all the time at night? No, just go home, go get some sleep, boss. But definitely you want to have your time. They need to know that they're important, right? So I start off when we do introductions, when they're hired at our swearing in ceremony, which is another thing the sheriff brought back. We make them stand and say oaths, and you swear to uphold the Constitution and do the right thing. That's important. But you're establishing that baseline culture that we're not gonna deviate from. But in my part of my speech, I give my background, 29 years, 29 years in the force. I've worked 13 years in different agency. Best 16 years have been here. Those kind of things, and then I talk about training. One of those things where I get myself in trouble towards the end of the year because I usually say yes to almost every kind of training, and I tell my staff, if something interests you that's available, ask for it. Make us say no. And I'm not kidding when I say that, because I approve training requests all the time. And I'm glad people are investing in it. And I'm glad we have scenario in Florida. The training is available a lot. And a lot of it's covered by trust fund and by the state. So those are easy to say yes to. As long as if the shift sergeant who's running the shift says, I can afford to lose this deputy for a week or a couple days, then I'm not going to say no. The sergeant's made that decision already. But just investing in your people, communicating with them, so they know that, I'm sometimes I get chastised sometimes because people think I'm spying on them. But I have deputies pop into my office. I have sergeants pop into my office just to come shoot the breeze. And I want that relationship. I want that open door policy. I want them to feel comfortable. If I walk in a building, people don't get nervous. They sometimes maybe they'll bust on me a little bit. Where you been, Mage? It's been a little while. And I want that. I want that level of comfort. And they know I'm busy, and I keep them in the loop, and I do my best to keep them apprised of what I'm doing. I often say, and Chris heard it during my speech, when I was sworn in, I get to represent them on a national stage. I get to represent my sheriff, and I get to represent the staff and my county, and that's an honor. But they know that I couldn't do these things if it wasn't for the great work that they're doing here. And sometimes it's just a simple thank you. And sometimes it's a simple, like I said, cup of coffee and a fist bump, and keeps people with a grin on their face.
Outstanding. Those are some great strategies, and thanks for sharing those. Any other thoughts on strategies while we're talking strategy?
That's exactly why you have retention. We were talking earlier today as a team that a lot of times people, they rise through the ranks because they're good at their job, not because they are good leaders. And if you are both, then you don't lose people because they want to work for you.
For sure. That's a solid observation. So what else, or anything else come to mind? You kind of got into, what should some jails be doing differently, right? Any other practices that you see out there that come to mind that you would recommend that jails reconsider?
I think one thing, and I think Major really said it well, that there's a consistency from the time they apply to the time they're on the job. And what we haven't really addressed in between is the training. There's the application process. They're being contacted. They're being treated like people through the process. The phone's being picked up. Somebody answers the phone when they call. And then they're on the floor and someone's leading them well. But what we see a lot of is disconnect between, we're going to the academy, I learned one thing, then I come over here and they say, forget that. Here's how it's done. And people do not feel good about that. They don't like it and they walk out the door. So when you have that, major point of attrition at the 30, 60, 90 day, it's often that disconnect. So keeping that consistency from the time they apply to this is the way we run things at our agency from here to here, soup to nuts.
So let me jump in. Eden, that was perfect because 2 days ago, our corrections academy is on spring break and our cadets are actually in the building. So I took advantage and I held court for about an hour and 15 minutes. And I said, I want to know if any of our FTOs say to you when you get on the floor, forget what you learned in the academy, I'm going to tell you how we do it here. I want to know who said it and why they said it, because that's ridiculous. The academy is there for a reason. It establishes a great baseline so you don't get yourself hurt. So you have at least some level of comfort when you're in there for the first time trying to manage a population of sometimes 100+ inmates. So that to try to throw that out the window and disregard the academy, that's disrespectful, especially since a lot of our supervisors here teach at the academy. So we're not just wasting our money for a second paycheck. There's a reason why you're building that level of training in. But I had a great conversation with them, and all of them were like, well, I hope we don't hear that because the academy's been, our guys we're doing great. That it's only a group of 5, and I have one of our 5 is the class leader. Another one's a squad leader, and I hear that they're all in the top 5% when it comes to academics, and I think we might have the top shot. So I think we're doing okay. And it's just funny that you said that, and I just had that conversation 2 days ago with them.
Fantastic. So before we wrap it up today, I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to, put out anything on the table that you don't think we talked about today that maybe we should have talked about in the way of advice or additional guidance. So we'll just go around the group and give you each an opportunity to provide any additional input, something that we should have said that we didn't get around to. So we'll start with you, Major Klucznik.
Well, I'll say this. All American Jail Association members have the option to post jobs on our job board on our website. So don't forget that.
For free.
For free, absolutely. And it's going to look like you need to put a code in. Just hit enter, and it'll post. I keep every one of our I can't say vacancies at this point, but I like to have a pool of people trying to apply still. But I just renewed it just 2 days ago, I believe. So take advantage of AJA, take advantage of the iConnect, and ask these questions that we're having here. We can follow up with a lot of things, and there's a lot of expertise across the country. Listen, I feel like I am blessed to be in a position I'm in and to be at the agency I am. And we're in a great place. Was it perfect? No. During COVID, we were hurting. I have 150 150 total employees in a jail, and I was down 20 deputies during COVID. So that hurt. You can feel that. I mean, that breaks down to 5 people a shift. That's a big section or a chunk of your staff. So we've worked hard to get back to where we are. And I'm happy that we are. And I'm willing to take a phone call or answer an email, even at 4:30 in the morning, to anybody who's got questions. If I can be of any assistance, or the association can be of any assistance. I know pretty much all the board members, and I know who may be in an area that you work or want to move to. Reach out to me. I'll put you in the right direction. I'll make a contact for you. I'll even wake Chris up at 5 in the morning and force him to drink a cup of coffee a little bit earlier to offer some assistance.
Yes, that's a true story. There's back and forth between the two of us that early in the day some days. So, Eden, any additional thoughts?
No, I probably echo that whatever it is that you're facing, you're not alone. I think that, when Whalls Group started in this industry several years ago, the first time we heard about some of these problems, we thought it all sounded unique. We speak to the next agency, and no, oh, you're having, oh, and you speak to the next one and the next one and the next one. And so it really is a matter of learning from one another. So, thank you for hosting this and letting us kind of bring some of those ideas to the table.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Thanks so much for having us today. I think one of the things that I would like to see a little bit more when it comes to recruitment, especially in jails and detention centers, is lateral hire opportunities. I don't think it's talked about enough. I don't think there's enough opportunities for them. And a lot of times it's even more difficult to bring them on board than it is to bring on a brand new employee that's never worked in corrections before. So I think that would be an interesting conversation for a different time for sure.
Okay, Mark, could you close us out, please?
Sure. Again, appreciate you having us, Chris and Shaun. I really enjoy working with you. Our first ever event was with you. You invited us in Columbus, Ohio. But I think one of the things that we didn't touch on is I know there's a lot of remote areas in the country, and there's a lot of areas that are not remote that are still struggling with the candidate pool because they've saturated that market. Remember, there's 200,000 transitioning militaries around the world that are coming in, right? And there's also, the reserve and guards, right? So we work closely with a lot of these facilities to drive them to these remote areas, right? The Colorados, the North Dakotas, the Wyoming, wherever it may be. And a lot of them do have a move in their back pocket. They'll be able to go from where they are to their home of record. Right. So there is a move there. We try to tell them not to use that move in case it doesn't work out for the first time. But if you're struggling and you can tap into those markets, right, it's a great source for you. Right. So we'd be happy to, guide you in that direction. You just got to look really about, like a tri-state area, what military installations are in, your workspace, right? And then have a work. It's like Shaun said, work in the high schools. We work the bases, right? That's a big piece of what we do, right? So that's something to think about.
Yeah, and as a veteran, I'm appreciative of your efforts in that area and your focus on recruiting former veterans into corrections in particular. And, very grateful for the work you've done at our conferences, and the information you've freely shared has definitely had a positive impact on our members and their nation's jails as far as helping them with their recruitment retention efforts. So thank you so much for that. I look forward to continuing the conversation here in a month and a half or so in Milwaukee. So I want to encourage everyone watching this episode to get registered now and join us and learn even more about this important topic to kind of make your recruiting and your retention efforts more effective. So great to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.